Adventure and Pipeman on W4CY Radio.
Wake up, America! It's time for the Adventures of Pipeman on W4CY.com, West Palm Beach's #1 internet radio station. Here's your host, the Pipeman.
Blood and matter mixed with dirt, the dragons do. Fields of bodies turn to ash and sinew. All hell's all around us, hunter on a trail, mortal weapons.
This is the Pipeman here on the Adventures of Pipeman W4CY Radio, and I'm here with our next guest who has some killer music that I think we kind of need nowadays with all the bull crap going on in the world. We need an escape, and this is it. So let's welcome to the show, Shaughnessy of Siege Perilous. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Hey, my pleasure. And so, yeah, I'm referring to, the new song you have out, new album you got coming out, and basically the fact that you take us down a journey, a much better journey than real life is right now. And
Yeah.
and it gives us also like the newest single is like this thing about loyalty and brotherhood, which I'm all about, and we've seemed to lose that in the whole world. Like they've gone crazy.
Yeah, I mean that's always been my biggest kind of draw to this genre of music. I mean, from the time I was a teenager when I first kind of started experiencing old school heavy metal and power metal, like the escapist element, but then also the themes, right? Like it's themes about like courage, brotherhood, like all of these like super positive things, and I really like grasped onto that, and I'm really excited to be able to contribute some of my own music, and most importantly like the music that my friends have helped make. I mean, this was primarily written by our guitarist. I did the lyrics and things like that, but I love how much we work together, especially when you're writing songs about brotherhood. It'd be weird if it was just one guy.
Yeah, and it would be weird if there's bands out there that are really, they're together but they're not together. That would be weird too. It's just it's something that has to be real.
Yeah, I think about like Fleetwood Mac, and how they played together for years, but they would not talk to each other off stage. It was like,
so weird.
How could you? I mean, I guess you could do it because you're making a crazy amount of money, but but I think in terms of the enjoyment of making and performing music, like I always have to be in bands with my friends. I feel like that's a rule. Now, I could potentially join another band and become their friends, and maybe not start out that way, but like I couldn't do that like for the long term with people who weren't like super close to me. I think the music also suffers when you do that. So
I agree with you 1,000,000%. Number one, this industry is hard enough as it is. It's something that you have to spend 24/7 with these people sometimes. So like life would really suck if you're in this industry and it's not fun, because that's the most redeeming feature of this industry.
Yeah. Sometimes, even like, I love how fun our music is. Sometimes even we have to take a step back and go like, okay, let's recenter ourselves a little bit. This got a little not fun for a second. Let's step back and make sure that we're having fun, because it's so much work. And even when your music is like a little, kind of silly and fantastical, like it's still so much work and a part of you that you're throwing out there into the world, and that not everybody has nice things to say.
Yeah.
So making sure that like at the core that like you're having fun with it is such an important part of that process.
And if at least you're having nice things to say to each other, like it's pretty bad when you got all that negative crap going on in the world, and then it's also within the band.
Yeah, and we definitely have a very good working relationship with each other. I mean, I'm friends with all of these guys outside of the band, which is good. And for the most part, they're all friends with each other outside of the band. Just a couple of the guys didn't know each other outside of the band until like they were both in the band together. So
right.
That's the real difference.
Yeah. And so I think going back to what you were saying too about, playing as somebody that would be in the audience, I can totally tell if the band's not vibing, and it's a totally different thing. Like it's a totally different experience when you see these bands up there that they don't like each other, they don't even want to be there, and they're just going through the motions. I want to be at a live show where the band is probably as much or more into it than I am, because that means, especially in metal, like you gotta be a metalhead to play metal.
Yeah, absolutely. Like nobody just like strolls into this, especially like it's, and particularly in our subgenre, like you've got to do it for the love of it, because there's not a lot of money in it. There is a base of very good dedicated fans, but there isn't so much money circulating in this genre that there's like a crazy amount of people doing this as like a full-time gig. And so like if that's the thing you're pursuing, power metal is not for you. But if you love the music like we do, then it's totally worth it.
So I have a trivia question for you.
Oh crap, it's early, but okay, yes.
I know, right?
I'm in.
Okay.
I'm ready.
So what band from the 80s was initially considered a power metal band because their genre didn't even exist yet?
It was initially considered a power metal band.
And they weren't really power metal, in my opinion, but
I mean, one of the thoughts, because Pantera during their glam phase had an album called Power Metal, but it was not power metal.
Right.
So that was one thought. That was one thought that I had. I mean, there's of course Halloween, who I think their first album came out in the late 80s, and they're a progenitor of the genre.
That's a tough one, right?
Yeah, because the only other ones I could think of are ones that you wouldn't have in the 80s said it was power metal, but you would today, which would be bands like Manowar or Dio.
Right.
Even though at the time they were just heavy metal, because we didn't have all like the crazy subgenreification that we do now. Granted, there are a lot of forms that didn't exist, like death metal was still developing, black metal, things like that.
Yep. It'll blow your mind, actually.
Are you going to say like Genesis or something?
No, but that would probably blow your mind. Okay, yeah. I was at this gig of this band. It was their first gig ever in LA. And the guitarist of the band came up to me after the gig, because that's the way it was in LA back then. You hung out with the band afterwards, walked up to the Rainbow and stuff like that. And so hands me his business card. I wish I had it today. And that business card said Metallica, power metal, Dave Mustaine.
Oh, yeah. I should have, because yeah, that was a late, yeah, that was, I forgot about that. Curses.
Right.
Yeah, that was a label that people had put on it before they had started to develop the idea of thrash, right?
Exactly.
And so, yeah, the early notion of power metal is what we would call thrash today. And now power metal, is a different thing. But that's
exactly
super cool. hanging out with Dave Mustaine.
I know, right? And you know what? It does make more sense today. Power metal makes, like, the whole concept of what the genre is today makes a lot more sense than before it was even developed, and they were calling bands power metal. Because to me, the whole idea of, the whole concept thing is power metal in and of itself.
Yeah, I definitely think that, like, not that you can't make great power metal that doesn't revolve around kind of epic storytelling that often takes place over like multiple tracks.
Right.
But I definitely think that, like, the storytelling is a huge part of it, and it's a huge draw for the people who really love power metal, because it also kind of gives you that thing that it gives you that kind of invitation to dive deeper into a song, because you're like, okay, so this kind of goes back to the CD booklets and the liner notes and things like that, where you'd be like, so what is like, okay, so I got most of these lyrics, I'm getting the gist of the song, what are like kind of the details of the song, and then gives you kind of that opportunity to deep dive a little bit more in.
Yeah.
So,
I think it also is great because it's got like such a funny as it may seem to say, an educational value to it, because it's storytelling with some basis in reality of how things were at point. So it's kind of like getting a history lesson.
Yeah, and we actually our next single is historical. It's called Across the Rubicon, and it's about Caesar and the fall of the Roman Republic. I'm a history teacher by day.
Nice.
So I definitely like, whether we're just like borrowing ideas from history or whether we're telling actual like stories from history, there's definitely like a lot of that. Our last single that we put out, Sons of the Verdant, definitely took pieces from that story that we hear about, all the time in history, which is, like native resistance to invaders, colonizers, that sort of thing. And so we took bits and pieces, but the other nice thing is that then you're not like borrowing somebody else's culture at the same time. You can just take bits and pieces from a bunch of different people's stories and put it together. I mean, which is also like, it's a common fantasy thing. George R.R. Martin did a ton of that in Game of Thrones.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting too, like the misconceptions of metal throughout the years, because people think it's just about, death, destruction, evil. And really, even if you take some of the most evil bands, or evil perceived, Slayer as an example, Hanneman was a total history nut, especially when it came to World War II. So most of their songs are all about World War II. And if you really read the lyrics, that's the problem out people outside of metal, is they hear these things, but they don't take the time to really read the lyrics to find out that it's not really about death and destruction. It is, but it's against it, not for it in a lot of cases.
Yeah, I mean, thinking about, Megadeth, right? Like, peace sells, but who's buying? There was a great interview a few years ago with Nico McBrain from Iron Maiden, because he had kind of become a born again Christian. They were asking him like, well, do you feel comfortable playing songs like Number of the Beast? He's like, well, Number of the Beast is an extremely Christian song, because all it really is saying is like, look at how the devil corrupts the souls of mankind. Like, that's what it's about. It's not necessarily like, yay, Satan. I mean, there is metal like that, and there is some of that is really, really good.
Right.
But most of it, you're right. Like, it's when they're talking about these negative things, it's to point them out negatively, sometimes with maybe a layer of irony that not everybody gets, and maybe that's where some of the confusion comes in, I think.
Well, I love that you used Maiden as an example, because that song in particular has quotes from the Bible.
Oh yeah, it starts off with, they kind of mash some different verses from Revelations together. Woe to you, O earth and sea.
Exactly. Yeah. Totally. So tell everybody how they can check out the latest single. It's badass, Oathsworn, and your upcoming EP, Creation's Call, coming out August 23rd, very soon. Very exciting. So let's tell everybody how they can pre-save the album, pre-order it, or just connect to you on socials, connect on the web, all that good stuff.
Yeah, so pre-saves for everything should be up right now on Spotify. Oathsworn's out now on all the major platforms, so wherever you like to go. We do have a cool lyric video that's up on YouTube, so that could be a good way, especially to just kind of get more of the story. So we've got Oathsworn out now. We've got Across the Rubicon, which comes out July something. July, I believe it is July 19th.
Nice.
For Across the Rubicon. And then the full EP comes out August 23rd. And then you'll catch us playing that whole EP the next day at the first Mile High Power Festival in Denver. You can follow us. We're on Facebook, Siege Perilous, Instagram, Siege Perilous Metal. We're on TikTok at, I think it's Siege Metal. I always need to write these down on a little post-it note, but I never think about doing it in advance. So yeah, I mean, pretty much any major social media, you can find us on. We try to stay active on all of those things and making that content for y'all.
Nice. So what's your either most fun or most embarrassing TikTok that you have?
Ooh. I mean, we've got some fun TikToks. So I'm 36 years old, so figuring out TikTok was weird. And so I definitely think there's probably some weirder, more cringy stuff in the early, like if you scroll back to like when we were releasing our first EP about a year and a half ago, because figuring out the format and stuff. And I always find it super weird what works and what doesn't. Like I did for Sons of the Verdant, we did what I thought was some great content. We were kind of running around the woods. I'm wearing elf ears, doing bits from the song. I thought that was really fun. And those pieces didn't do super great. And then the other day for Oathsworn, I was just literally in the parking lot about to go into the gym and did some stupid lip syncy stuff. And that stuff is like triple what the other content was doing. I don't know if that's a function of the song or it's just a function of how TikTok works. I still feel like I'm in that phase where I'm just throwing stuff at the wall and trying to see what sticks.
It is kind of the game with all of them, right? They change the algorithms that you got to play this game. But it does feel weird, doesn't it, to be a millennial and be kind of outdated at arena.
Yeah, I mean the nice thing is we play music in a subgenre that skews a little bit older. Like I mean when I looked at like our Spotify numbers and stuff for Sons of the Verdant, like our biggest age demographic was 45 to 59.
I was gonna say power metal's like definitely. I'm a Gen Xer, so it's definitely a Gen X thing, and maybe you could even say boomer thing.
Yeah, it definitely, because I mean it stretches back to the early 80s with Dio and Manowar, and then and the new wave of British heavy metal bands like Maiden and Priest.
Yeah,
like I wouldn't say that they are power metal, but you can't have power metal without them.
Yeah, and we totally considered Maiden power metal, like not exclusively, but even once Bruce joined the band, and every album was kind of a concept storytelling album.
Yeah, I definitely think that like that was such a huge thing that Maiden and Dio really brought to the table, because you don't like. I guess Judas Priest has done some of those, but I think the ones of those that they did were post 1990. I don't think any of their albums from the 80s had that had that kind of conceptual vibe to it.
No. Well, your music is badass, and I think everybody should check it out. And do you have any final words for our listeners? Anything we haven't covered that they should know?
No, like I said, we're playing Mile High for anybody in Denver in the Rocky Mountain region. We got the first inaugural Mile High Power Festival on August 24th. It's
nice.
gonna be really big. I mean, we're playing, but I always tell people there's much better bands playing too. Because we're like the very start. We're the very start of the day, but like we've got a lot of the other big U.S. power metal bands coming through. So we've got Lords of the Trident, Judicator, Seven Spires, and Ether Realm are our headliners. So like it's a really big lineup, and tickets are only $40 for like a whole massive day-long festival of heavy metal. So it's a really good deal, and I want to see that place packed.
You can't even take an Uber to a festival nowadays for $40, so that's a good deal.
Yeah. It's like when they were interviewing our friend Soren, who runs the festivals, the founder of the festival. The people that interview him, they're like, "Is it really only $40?" Because usually it'd be 2 or 3 times that, and it is an amazing lineup of bands. So
love it. Well,
really excited for that.
Everybody will have to go check that out for sure. And thanks for giving us great music, and thanks for being on the Adventures of Pipeman.
Well, thanks for listening, and thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Adventures of Pipeman on W4CY Radio.